Is this drawing Islamophobic? If I name this character Mohamed, what changes? If the character is named Mohamed, is it now Islamophobic? If this is Jesus with Mo, what changes now? Is it now Islamophobic? One of the real questions when answering that should always be, who decides? And who gets to decide what is Islamophobic? On January 29, 2017, just a few weeks ago, a mass shooting at a mosque in Quebec City left 6 Muslims dead and 19 injured. The alleged gunman has been charged with 6 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. He is a Canadian citizen, he's Caucasian male, and was a student at Laval University. This despicable act of hatred was immediately called an act of terrorism by the Prime Minister of Canada and was condemned by members of the Canadian government, along with high-profile members of the Muslim community. The Islamic Society of North America, the Islamic Circle of North America, the Muslim Association of Canada, and the National Council of Canadian Muslims strongly condemned the attack. At the same time, Canadians across the nation showed an outpouring of support and left thousands of messages of support and raised thousands of dollars for the victims and their families. Now, a motion, M103, was debated in Parliament last week and will be voted on in April. A motion is a proposal moved by a member of Parliament to draw attention to an issue considered urgent or of public interest. It cannot become a law, but it can lead to the development of a bill that eventually could become a law. So here is the motion. It says that, in the opinion of the House, the government should A. Recognize the need to quell the increasing public climate of hate and fear, B. Condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination, and take note of House of Commons petition E411 and the issues raised by it, and C. Request that the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage undertake a study on how the government could 1. Develop a whole-of-government approach to reducing or eliminating systemic racism and religious discrimination, including Islamophobia, in Canada, while ensuring a community-centered focus with a holistic response through evidence-based policy making, and 2. Collect data to contextualize hate crime reports and to conduct needs assessment for impacted communities, and that the committee should present its findings and recommendations to the House no later than 240 calendar days from the adoption of this motion, provided that in its report the committee should make recommendations that the government may use to better reflect the enshrined rights and freedoms in the Constitution Acts, including the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, while being debated, some have called for the removal of the word Islamophobia, and instead call on the government to condemn all forms of systemic racism, religious intolerance, and discrimination of Muslims, Jews, Christians, Sikhs, Hindus, and other religious communities. Now, Member of Parliament Iqra Khalid has chosen not to amend the motion. During the debate, she said, "I have been asked by some to change the wording of my motion to remove Islamophobia and other references. I will not do so any more than I would speak of the Holocaust and not mention that the overwhelming majority of victims were 6 million followers of the Jewish faith, and that anti-Semitism was the root cause of the Holocaust. We cannot address a problem if we fail to call it by its true name." Now, some members of Parliament, including David Anderson of Cypress Hills Grasslands, believe that the word Islamophobia being included in the motion is damaging. He stated, "This word is a conversation stopper and it needs to be set aside. We do a disservice to actual victims and their families when we describe what happened to them with the same word that we use to describe insulting language. Those attacks are not on the same level. Let us not describe them that way." Now, what I think here is that the term Islamophobia has two severe issues. The first is the lack of clarity in the definition of the word, and the second is who will use this lack of clarity and to what extent. We're only talking about a motion here, but a motion can eventually turn into a bill that becomes law. And putting in clouded language that isn't crystal clear certainly may not be what's best. The word Islamophobia will not be misrepresented by anyone with good intentions. At the same time, it certainly will be misrepresented by those who intend to stifle speech, dialogue, and criticism. That's why the language has to be changed. If the word Islamophobia remains in the motion, it supports the conflation and confusion associated with its use and helps to justify its improper use by those with an agenda. Now, Islam is not a race, it's a religion. Muslims are not a race. They are followers of Islam. It is not racist to criticize Islam. It certainly is bigoted and absolutely unacceptable to attack Muslims as individuals or as a group based upon their religious beliefs. It is not bigoted, however, to challenge or criticize the beliefs that they hold. We need absolutely clear language to differentiate between targeting people or targeting ideas. Islamophobia simply does not do this. Now, Iqra Khalid has received death threats and hate mail as a result of her proposed motion, and that naturally can't be tolerated at all. That's just disgusting. Having said that, it also doesn't mean that she's necessarily correct by default, and that everybody else can't at least express their opinion. Here's a few short clips where other people who are ex-Muslims explain what they have as far as an issue with the term Islamophobia, what it means to them, and some of the difficulties they've encountered.
There are people who use the phrase Islamophobia, both to mean criticism of the people and of the religion. I know that many Muslims do this. It's an easy way of stopping others from criticizing their religion. But I believe that many in the West use this word because they haven't quite thought of why it might be harmful. Islamophobia is a meaningless term. It serves to confuse and to muddle two very different forms of intolerance based on two very different reasons towards which there should be two very different reactions. Sometimes it is claimed that the critique of religion is critique of the identity of the believer and is therefore bigotry. This person's identity happens to be based around their ideology, so if you criticize their ideology, you are necessarily generating hate towards that person. But I wonder what would happen if we applied this type of thinking to everything. What if New Agers decided that criticism of New Age spiritual healing was a form of hate against people who chose to identify that way? What if Hindus decided criticism of the caste system was a deeply offensive form of racism against Hindu people? How much of that would retard reform?
When the Charlie Hebdo incident happened, I expected all newspapers in the free world, all televisions, the whole media, to stand in solidarity with them and republish those cartoons to show them this is what we do, this is what we are about, it's an idea. And the Islamophobia meme, if you want to, first of all, to criticize an idea is not to be phobic. Islam is a religion, it's a faith, it's a set of beliefs, it's an idea, it's not the people. Muslims are very diverse and many of them disagree on many things, including the position of Mohamed, including whether Mohamed should be drawn or not drawn, criticized or not criticized. So given all of that, yes, you're right. It's not only the government. We shouldn't, of course, the government is lobbied by 57 nations of the Organization of Islamic Conference that through the United Nations and other international bodies is trying to make them adopt laws that leave Islam out of the realm of discussing ideas and criticizing ideas.
All right, I want to close this video with a note just about the blasphemy laws. People have expressed concern that this may be the beginning, and using a term like Islamophobia, if the definition isn't clear, could be used by some with an agenda to promote the inability to criticize Islam. Now, this is Gillian Gibbons. She is a British national who was working in Sudan as a teacher in 2007. She was arrested, tried, and convicted for insulting Islam under Section 125 of the Sudanese Criminal Act. 5 days after her arrest, about 10,000 protesters took to the streets demanding her execution, after local imams denounced her during their prayers. Now, she was moved to a secret location out of fear for her safety. What was her crime? Well, her crime was that she allowed a class of 6-year-old students to name a teddy bear Mohamed. That's all. After days of negotiation with officials from the UK, she was released and returned to Liverpool. She spent 8 days in jail. There was a large public outcry at the time, including condemnation from several Muslim groups around the world. Now, the implementation of criminal law in Sudan is completely different than what occurs in Canada. I wouldn't want to use a single extreme example and indicate that this is likely to occur in the West. On the other hand, we have to acknowledge that extreme views exist everywhere. And we also shouldn't be denying the fact that there are people that do have an agenda and want to use confusing terms like Islamophobia. Have them put into some sort of codified law and then be able to use them to their advantage. And we just have to be mindful of that. So we return. Now, is this Islamophobic? Let's change the language in M103 to ensure the line remains clear.
If you like the video, smash that like button. If you don't like it, leave a comment explaining why. If you have nothing to add,
ZeroFox Gibbons.